Welcome to the Equipped Disciple channel. My name is Rick McClatchy. I will be your host. We are here to be and to make disciples of Jesus, and we do that through daily devos, through Sunday sermons, and through other discipleship resources. We are here to equip you to be an equipped disciple. Welcome into another day of your daily devos. I'm Pastor Rick. We're jumping into Genesis 25. This is officially the halfway mark, y'all. Great job. Keep up the good work. So we're going to talk about Abraham's clock winding down, folks. We've been spending a lot of time talking about the man, and now he's getting ready to call it quits. So here we go. We'll jump into verse 1. Abraham had taken another wife whose name was Keturah, and she bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Jokshan fathered Sheba and Dedan. Dedan's sons were the Asherim, Letushim, and Lumen. I should get paid extra for this part, you know what I'm saying? And Midian's sons were Ephah, Epher, Hanok, Beta, and Eldah. And these were all the sons of Keturah. Abraham gave everything he owned to Isaac. But Abraham gave gifts to the sons of his concubines, and while he was still alive, he sent them eastward, away from his son Isaac, to the land of the east. And so Abraham gave everything that he owned to Isaac because he recognized the son of promise. It's just interesting. He wasn't technically the firstborn. That would be Ishmael. And he certainly was not the only one, right? And so for him to just receive everything, Abraham, Abraham wanted to do everything he could to funnel the family fortune, everything about the family into the promised seed of Isaac. And of course, the only son that he had through Sarah. So that was obviously, a very big deal. Son of promise, the promised one, far in advance, waited 25 years for him. So big deal there. And then he sent the other sons eastward. So again, just doing what he can to create space for Isaac that he is able to have his family and grow in the land where God called him to. So every single one of these actions that he's taking are acts of faith. At our church, we say all the time, we say that faith is acting, behaving like you believe that what God says is true. And so this is the epitome of faith right here, because Hebrews chapter 11, walks us through, like Abraham, man, he was a man of faith. And it's because he acted like what God said was true, even when there was very little evidence to believe that it actually was true. So he sent the other sons eastward to create space for Isaac to say, hey, this is your land, live in it, walk in it, fill it. So this is the length of Abraham's life, 175 years. He took his last breath, died at a good old age, old and contented, and he was gathered to his people. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre, in the fields of Ephron, son of Zohar, the Hethite. This was the field that Abraham bought from the Hethites. Abraham was buried there with his wife Sarah. After Abraham's death, God blessed his son Isaac, who lived near Beer-lahai-roi. These are the family records of Abraham's son Ishmael, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's slave, bore to Abraham. So interesting, that they specify Sarah's slave. So that's the identity that they want kind of hanging on to Hagar's legacy, because they want to draw a very clear distinction between Ishmael and Isaac. Like they want to very clearly define who the promised son was. I was kind of honing in on this good old age and old and contented, because I just thought, speaking of Abraham as a man of faith, and then, boy, one of the very next things that's said about him is that he lived to a good old age, old and contented. And I thought, man, what a great reward for a life of faith well lived is to live to an age to be old and contented. Really, living a life of faith is the only way to arrive at, I mean, you can get old, sure, but to get there and to be contented is a whole nother ballgame. Am I right? And so I was just really impacted by that phrase and just thought it worth kind of bringing it up to ask yourself, am I living my life in such a way that I will arrive at the same kind of destination as Abraham, that I will arrive, whether you're old or not, is not always within our grasp, to control. We have little things we can do, but the contented part, that's one that, for it's like Paul said, for I've learned in whatsoever state I am to be content. And that's actually where Philippians 4:13 comes in. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. He was talking about being contented, really, in whatever place you find yourself. And so it's through the power of Christ that we can live a life that is contented. And that's what Abraham discovered, is that his life walking as a friend of God, walking in relationship with God, was the thing that allowed him to arrive at the end of his life old and contented. It's a great goal. God blessed Isaac after the death of Abraham. So as long as Abraham was alive, the blessing of God was just kind of being funneled right to Abraham, and it was blessing a whole bunch. It was spilling all over on other people, So on Ishmael and all of his descendants, and on the six sons of Keturah and all of their descendants, it's just like multiplication, because God just put in Abraham kind of the multiplication thing, right? Like, it's just anything that he is involved with just grows and multiplies. Isaac is 75 years old, and Jacob and Esau, Isaac's sons, whom we have not read about them being born yet, but a little spoiler alert here, they're actually 15 years old at the time that Abraham passes away. And I thought that was kind of a cool thing that I never really put together before, because when you're reading the stories, it feels separated. Like Abraham dies before you read about Jacob and Esau being born. But the fact that Abraham very well, lived around and hung around Jacob and Esau is pretty cool to think of. And so, but God blessed Isaac after the death of Abraham. It's like, I think it's kind of one of those things where you stop just living under the God of your father, and you start to know God as the God of your life, and I think it's really critical that we live our lives getting to know God as our God, that we know him and claim him and walk with him personally, and not trying to kind of ride coattails of anybody into a relationship with God. And so God blessed Isaac after the death of Abraham, 75 years old. Pretty interesting, just you don't think about Isaac being that old when Abraham passed away, because Abraham was so old when he was born. So verse 13, these are the names of Ishmael's sons, their names according to the family records of Nebaioth. Ishmael's firstborn, then Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jeter, Naphish, and Kedemah. These are Ishmael's sons, and these are their names by their settlements and encampments, 12 leaders of their clans. So even from Ishmael's line, boom, he's just a bunch of leaders, right? Clans, families, encampments, settlements. This is the length of Ishmael's life, 137 years. And so if you're doing the math, so Abraham probably lived until Ishmael was about 90 years old ish, if my math serves me correctly. Again, just to kind of give some context, to how the families were kind of coexisting. And so then he lived another 45 years after Abraham died. And then Ishmael passed away. So he said he took his last breath, died, and was gathered to his people, and they settled from Havilah to Shur, which is opposite Egypt as you go towards Ashur. And he stayed near all his relatives. Just as the prophetic word that had gone over his life declared, he kind of just falls right in line with that. And kind of the final thought here is, interestingly, in their culture, He was gathered to his people. They had this thought, this concept that there was a life to come, that when you died, you're being gathered to your people, that you were, that you're going to the afterlife, to live somewhere else, that life wasn't just done once you died. And so they had a sense of the afterlife, even if it always doesn't seem like it by the way they were living. But recently I preached through the book of First Corinthians, and as you get towards the end of the book of First Corinthians, it talks a lot about the resurrection of the dead in general, the resurrection of Christ. And because Christ rose from the dead, it means he's coming back again for us. And I was really deeply impacted as we preached through that section of just the concept, the thought that Jesus is coming back because he rose from the dead. And do I think about that on a regular basis? Do I allow that truth to impact how I live my life? And that just kind of got brought back up to me as I was reading about, he's gathered into his people, just this statement that means they were convinced that there was some sense of an afterlife, because not all of these believers, not all of these people were followers of Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's never identified as the God of any of these other people. Not to say that they were necessarily completely, cut out or anything like that. But do you live? Like, ask yourself this question today and tomorrow and the next day. Am I living as if Jesus coming back is an ever-present reality to me? That I actually believe it's going to happen. I actually think that I'm going to kind of give account for the talents and giftings that God's given me, and am I properly using them, and all of that kind of stuff. So with that, a big hearty God bless you. Have an amazing day, and I will see you tomorrow.